All right. So we are here to talk about Rooted in Jesus. We have Linda and Francis and Andrea and Jan and Bill to talk about our takeaways. And the first thing we're going to start off with is kind of the overarching themes of what we took away from the Rooted in Jesus conference. Kind of overarching things that we heard either during the sessions or kind of in conversation with people, or else things that kind of came up that weren't part of a specific breakout session. So we're going to get started with that, and we're going to let Linda share with us first.
Well, so I think for me, it was what the presiding bishop said, like at the very beginning, which was how nice to break down the silos and bring together a bunch of people from all kinds of different areas of the church. So it wasn't just the formation people, and it wasn't just the evangelism, or that it was all of them together. And to see all that and to have an experience of that was very powerful for me. It was very good. It was sort of like general convention, but without all the work to do. So that was wonderful for me. Francis, how about you?
Well, Linda, I was having the exact same kind of thought earlier this morning. I was thinking, I went to a general convention back in 2006. I wasn't doing I wasn't a delegate, I was as a visitor, and it was just so much fun to do that. And I thought, wow, this really reminds me of that, except we had the breakout sessions. It wasn't just visiting the exhibitors, but so having that opportunity to see folks and connect with folks that I hadn't seen in a long, long time. And even if it's just briefly, and to have I just was really impressed with all the different sessions that were offered, and to be able to choose those sessions, and to be able to switch when I had something else come up that I wanted to do instead. I did that. I switched. And so just the flexibility of it also was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Andrea?
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Francis. I had two things that I really felt came out in big ways. The first one that I kept hearing from different sessions was a need for mentoring. I feel like that kind of cropped up in lots of different sessions, and kind of ways to do that, but really more just the sense need of it. And then the other thing that I really took away was there was a lot of conversation about the need for lay training and nurture and ways to uplift, and really name lay ministry as an important and vital piece of, our corporate worship together and our experience of leadership. There were a couple resources that really kind of underscored that as well. There was Iona congregational videos, these congregational videos that are being formed out of Seminary of the Southwest, where their professors have created like 7 to 10 minute teaching sessions that congregations can use, all about, biblical literacy type things and church history, and I think there were some ethics ones as well, kind of a wide-ranging thing, but really with the intent to train congregations. And then there was also the Revive program that you may have seen out of Forward Movement. It's a small group-based lay. Well, it's really kind of focused towards lay people, kind of training them to be confident in prayer and Bible study and kind of meeting together. So those were two resources that kind of floated to the top for me that addressed these overarching lay training needs, that didn't come out of specific sessions. Bill, can you hear us?
I can hear you again.
Excellent. Welcome back. Would you like to share about some main takeaways that you had?
Well, I took lots of notes during the presiding bishop session on evangelism, and then lots of notes from William Barber's sermon at, I guess it's a sermon, speech at the Clark campus. the sessions, though, that I got otherwise in, really intrigued with were ones on taking the church out in the neighborhood, mission work. And I guess the resource there was there's the methodology they used for the conversations in the neighborhood were the IAF, and there are free YouTube videos on one-on-ones from the Industrial Area Foundation methodology, and so those one-on-one conversations, kind of key to lots of evangelism mission work. So I intend to view those videos. I know that David Gortner has experience with the IAF methodology as well. So anyway, intrigued with that. But without going in a lot more about that, but that was a helpful session. Also, then I went to Devin Anderson's presentation on civic engagement and working in a purple community, and she talked about authority of generations, a method of encouraging conversations within a congregation, where the kind of a circle process of raising conversations without, it's not issue specific, but just to get people of diverse viewpoints speaking with one another. And so that is something I want to follow up with. And Jan.
Well, I felt like I might actually have a handle on my job by the time I digest everything that came out of that, because I feel like the RDT has put in, and I've certainly put in, lots of effort for years and years, and I don't think I have a whole lot to show for it in terms of the thriving nature of the congregations. So the basic takeaway I got from all the stuff I did on evangelism and church culture and all this was evangelism has to rest on formation. Formation has to rest on a desire somehow to be a disciple, to want to do this. I'm very sure that just telling people to fall in love with Jesus again and again is not going to help. They need to understand love more in the marriage sense of love as commitment rather than emotion, where you plight your troth, but that has to come out of why. Why would they do this? We don't do it because we think everyone's going to hell if they're not saved for Jesus. So, and we're not going to hell if we don't save somebody. So what's our motivation here? So it just felt like the whole thing just kept peeling back layers and layers out of the urgency to move forward, the justice issues, the incarnation of that love as justice. It's creating the urgency in me to figure out how do we get back to what are the basic things we need to do. So I've got reams of notes. And this morning, the reading from Hebrews at morning prayer, provoke one another to love and good deeds. I loved it. How are we going to provoke one another? How are we going to provoke the congregations to love and good deeds? What can we, and the need, it's like a balance back and forth. If they want evangelism, if truth be told, to save their church, to put more people in the church to save it, how do we help translate that into a wider scope of good news and give them the first steps that they will need? If we just talk about getting your own relationship with Jesus together, I think the anxiety about the dying churches, for some of them, will overwhelm their ability to even hear that. So giving them some first steps that also let them feel like they're making progress in evangelism, and having those first steps always keep exposing the need for relationship with God through Christ. Make a sort of a dialogue back and forth between, and I was thinking when they kept saying, you've got to have some first steps. And I thought of the change formula. Change equals V times F, whatever, and one of them is F, first steps. So I'm going around and around trying to sort of sort this out into a rhythm and a process for working with churches on both their formation of their relationship and their ability to tell the story. And again, getting them to tell a story, and they can't come up with their story. Can we provoke them to dig deeper into what is the good news for them? It's all in kind of like pieces all over the floor at the moment, trying to find out, like a big floor puzzle, what goes where, and a lot of it is very circular, like the Gather, Transform, Send is. So I'm still looking at my notes and trying not to get into overwhelm. It was pretty intense. I felt like I was there with 3,000 or 1,399 of the greatest extroverts in the American church and me. And literally fled to the church courtyard once for a few minutes of peace and quiet, and then plunged back in. But for an introvert, it was quite a workout.
It was, for sure. I know many of us experienced that. Yeah, but Jan, that sounds like great thinking, and I'm so excited to hear what comes out of that. So please, stay in conversation about what comes of your processing.
Okay.
So let's move to kind of walking through some of our sessions and giving some specific takeaways from them. Linda, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I suppose I think this was the last one I went to, is innovation and discernment. It was in the leadership thing. And one of it was just the part of it, they talked about just sort of the being in a secular age, and how if sometimes believers doubt, then sometimes doubters believe. And we need to honor that. And so part of the secular age is that we've come to a place where people like the whole thing is to express your true self, to discover and express your true self. And as the Episcopal Church, we kind of got on board with that. Yes, you want to be your true self, and your religion needs to be your true self. And so that was great. We won the big culture war. You don't have to be told what to do, told what to believe, and all that. But we lost the organizational war, because that means you don't need a church to tell you what to believe, to tell you how to get to God, And so the whole thing then is, so what's our purpose? If you can get that community at the local brewery, at the local coffee shop, then what's a church for? And that the challenge, so he did the story of Lydia in Acts. Maybe some of you were there. Just they did it as dwelling in the Word, and just sort of asked some questions. So what if the Holy Spirit is really leading the church? So how do we catch up with that? Where is our focus? And part of it was that Paul, in going out to people, just had this sense of the Spirit is not leading me to this place, and so let's go here. So they went there and thought, well, we'll meet with the men here, and there were no men. He had this vision of the men coming to greet him, and the men didn't come to greet him. I never saw that in that passage before. Instead, he ends up with Lydia, and Lydia's got a whole bunch of ladies down by the river or something, and so ends up that the church is there. And so I think they were encouraging us to ask people to go out in the neighborhood, to walk around the block. And I identified with that a lot, because I know most of the people who go to St. James drive to St. James, and they never see what's out. Now, some of them teach up the street, but essentially we drive to church and drive home. And since I live here, I walk the dog around, my wife and I go, walk here, walk there. And so we do see some of the neighborhood. And so it's like this sense of what what is the Spirit leading us to in the neighborhood, and can other people join us there? Or, we're so focused on, well, do we want to do campus ministry? Do we not want to do campus ministry? Forgetting that most of the people who have joined this church are people who, since I've been here, are people who've come to Pullman to retire. So, that's a whole different, part. It's not the young families, but it's people who are trying to find belief, who are doubters, who believe. So that's, he asked us to look at not doing programs, and that's hard because we're in control when we set up a program, but to rather go out and listen and talk to people and meet people and start small, ask questions. Like he gave some examples of people who walked down the neighborhood and saw that there was a bus that that came like every day that took people to the casino. And so they got on the bus and went to the casino, and we're talking to people on the bus, and not everybody would talk to them, but they talked to a few people and found out a lot just by being curious. And that sometimes evangelism is about listening first, not talking. And we kind of shy away from evangelism because we think we have to talk. We have to tell people things, and it's actually more about listening. So that just kind of brought up in me a lot of things that, that I wonder about. A lot of things I wonder about with my community here, and probably with other communities too. And he gave us a good resource that I haven't looked up yet, and it's at Luther Seminary, luthersem.edu, and it's called Faith Lead. At Luther Seminary. faithlead.luthersem.edu. That has a lot of resources on stories and research and training and all kinds of stuff. So that was the one that.
Isn't that where Dwight Shiley teaches? Luther Seminary?
Could be.
I think so.
Probably. That was probably, I wonder if he's the one who led. I didn't write down who was leading this, but because I would never have thought that.
I think I was there, so it wasn't Shiley.
You might have been. Yeah. Francis, you want to go next?
Sure. So one of the first ones sessions that I went to having to do with intergenerational relationships, and so conversations that the presenter had been having with different congregations and generations. And so what came out of those conversations, she had some, this saying that this is really important, that we have to kind of get into folks, is that the idea that a quick fix must die. The idea that if we do this, this will happen. And that idea has got to go away. And somehow we've got to get that into folks' psyches, and then to realize that it's really, I think Jan was saying, relationships are the way of love, and that they require our most valuable resource, and that's time. And that understanding that we have to give each other time. It's tough because we've got these folks who come into the door and we're like, okay, we can put you here, 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 here. And we haven't even developed a relationship, and we haven't figured out how to let them know, well, we just want to give you time and give us time. So, and then the other piece is that she said is that confession is foundational, and that confessing what we're good at and confessing what we're not good at. And so that was a big takeaway. And also that, so then how to promote conversations, getting conversations being promoted within a congregation, real conversation. And then that was kind of, I thought it was a different session, but kind of close in on that, was the soft space gone wrong, where they're talking about now, which I didn't even know what soft space was, but that's any kind of space that you put in a church place for, how we say, well, young families need a space. And instead of separating them out into a room, let's give them a space in the church. And how we do that with all these great intentions, but sometimes we don't take into account the effect it's having on the community. And they were talking about how in VBS at Virginia Seminary, they wanted to have a family service. So they put a blanket down, to have the kids there and the space, and did not go well. And so they talked through that. They talked through what they did with that and how they went back to it and how they continued to work with it to try to adjust the way it needed to be adjusted. And some folks who liked the blanket were very upset that those kind of adjustments were made. And so it was kind of like that, sharing that experiment and saying that that's okay to do this, and and here's how we began to check the pulse of the congregation and understanding the relationships. So it went back to, what's our relationships with each other and how do we promote our relationships, and how do we think of the space as something that's not, a lot of times it becomes just like a second playroom, the soft space. So how can you turn it into something that's more intentionally worshipful for them, as opposed to just saying, well, here's a play space for you to be in. So those two, and then the final one just kind of came up because Jan said you got to go up to the 25th floor and see the sacred spaces up there. And I did that, and she was just about to start her session. So I'm like, I'm going to this one because just to learn about the innovation and opportunities to create and to think about how to enhance. As she says, we're already in experiential worship. We get up, we go to communion, we come back. We're doing things, and so to be able to emphasize to folks, we are experiential, and here's some other ways that we can also contribute to that experience and kind of help folks understand that as well. So just a lot of incredible ideas, and especially for thinking in terms of what are we saying, how do we talk to folks about. So these are tools that now we've got more tools. And just to kind of say, I went to a worship service in Atlanta on Sunday, and the rector had gone to the conference too. And, she told her congregation, it's my job, it's Tim's job, he's the associate rector, and it's the vestry's job to give you the tools to share your story. That's our job, is to give you the tools. We can't make you pick up the tool, but we can make sure that you have the tools that you need, which I thought, again, it was what you were talking about, Jan. I just thought, oh yeah, that's exactly, how do we help folks pick up the tool? I think it's Andrea.
Yep, those were great. Thanks, Francis. So I had 6 sessions that I went to that I thought were takeaways, but some of them are really short. The first one I went to was a leadership for formation practitioners. And they started by talking about Simon Sinek's The Golden Circle that Bishop Gretchen talked about at convention, and really, figuring out your why. So I spent a lot of time kind of rehashing that. One thing that I thought was a really great takeaway from that session is they said they had this idea of once you figure out your congregational why, like your, whether it's like in the form of a congregational rule of life or a mission statement or what have you, make sure you repeat it regularly. And they had this idea of like maybe writing a collect or having an opening statement, like somehow incorporating that into your regular worshiping life. And I thought that was a great idea to kind of like keep your congregation centered on, this is why we do what we do and this is what we're about. So I thought that was a great idea. I went to a discipleship plenary on Wednesday that was kind of a conversation between Lisa Kimball and Miriam McKenney. And there were really, what came out of that one is mentorship, like the need for mentorship, the need to nurture a network of intergenerational mentoring at churches so it's not dependent on just one or two particular people. They talked a little bit about how to encourage that. There wasn't as much about the how to do that. But they did say one idea to encourage this mentoring network was to have an intergenerational worship service and to kind of help change the dialogue in in your congregational community. What does it mean to worship together? How does that look? How do we encourage all the different generations in ways that aren't focusing solely on a particular generation at a time, but kind of welcoming everyone. Again, I didn't think it was flushed out enough of the how to do that. But the one thing that they did say that I thought was great was to make sure that you affirm the moments you see mentorship cropping up, to point it out and just to say how powerful that gifting is. So when you see mentoring taking place, and it could be, just like a short moment, or you notice someone who's really has that gifting, to speak up and say, I see you mentoring this person, and that's powerful. Or, or even asking them a question saying like, do you, have you ever done any training around mentoring? I think you might have a mentoring gift. Like, how can we support this gift? On Thursday, I went to a storytelling, like the title of the session was Storytelling, How Church Communicators Tell Their Story. I thought the title was a little misleading because what the session was actually about was using different media things, like different, videos or audio or podcasts to tell your story. Some of the things from that session that I thought were really good is they talked about how to really communicate the story of your congregation, and how to do that, through your website, through videos that you create. They talked about, how telling stories is different than reporting facts. And how when you're, like, if you're taking a video of some of your congregants, they use the example of Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I don't know if all of you are familiar with that, but it's essentially an interview. Jerry Seinfeld is interviewing other comedians, but the fact that they add cars, like they drive somewhere, the fact that they include coffee, like they're drinking coffee, suddenly you have a story. And so the idea of kind of like adding pieces into more of interview type situations to make it into a story. They also talked about some very practical tools. They talked about a DR05 recorder as like an audio recorder that was reasonably priced and a really good tool if you want to do video type stuff. They also said that Zoom makes an audio recorder that they thought was pretty good. And then they recommended something called a phone cage, and they showed one. It's like pretty much like this metal frame that you stick your phone in the middle of, and then you can attach like lights or audio things, and you can hold this frame and use it to kind of, turn your phone into a video recorder. And they recommended making trailers, so if you're like starting a a small group or a book study or a new program at your church, the idea of having a video trailer to promote that, I thought that was a great idea. And I had some other ideas too. I put them on the form that I put out, but I don't want to. Oh, actually, I do want to say one more thing. They highly recommended, if you see videos on other websites and things that you think would be good content for your website, like feel free to use that. Obviously, like sort your sites, cite your sources, or do whatever you need to do as far as asking for permission. But the idea of utilizing the resources that are already out there, they recommended TriTank, which TriTank is an Episcopal kind of an experimental group, and they've put together a video called "What is the Episcopal Church?" And it's just a very easy introduction about what the Episcopal Church is, and it's available for everyone to plunk into their websites and kind of use as you see fit. They also recommended the Bible Project, which are videos about the Bible. They do have great videos. I've used them before, so that's another thing that you can kind of utilize. I went to another session called The Vitality of Small Congregations. I went to that with Francis. And some of the things from there that I really appreciated, they talked about how your target audience is really the one sitting in your pews. So serve who is there, and that will energize your congregation. A lot of times small congregations will try to say we want young families, or we want young professionals, or but those aren't the people actually sitting in the pews. So the idea of serve and focus on the people who are there, I thought that was a really practical and helpful thing. They also talked about just the wonderful things about small churches. Small churches know the people and the issues really deep and really, really deeply, really personally. So really kind of, seeing small congregations as a gift and a positive thing, not as, just dying out churches. She also gave she recommended a book by Robert Butler called The Life Review, which is a book on confronting death. That sounded really interesting. I'm going to look into that further. But the idea that, small congregations many times are elderly people, and so the needs of their spiritual practices and the things that they're processing will naturally be different than other congregations. So, embrace that, talk about those things. I went to another session called Diocesan Roadmap, which was really for diocesan leaders, about hearing the voice of congregations and kind of, thinking on a diocesan level about what's happening with spiritual development. They had some good ideas. They said one of the ideas that I starred was researching experiences for parents and kids to do together, like these kinds of events being really powerful ones, repeatedly powerful, kind of rising to the top. And so encouraging churches to think about what experiences are you creating that are really intergenerational, where parents and kids are doing them together, and maybe you're involving other ages as well. There was also a question that was posed that I thought was really good. We did an exercise where we kind of put up with sticky notes different programs that we have based on this framework of faith development, from no faith to mature faith. And one thing that kind of was startling as we looked at that was there weren't a lot of adult beginning processes for faith development. There were a lot of ones for kids, but not really where are the inroads for adults who come in with no faith, and what are the processes for them to be able to begin that process in the church? So I thought that was a really good question. And the last one that I went to that I thought was worth sharing about was the power of coaching. And Demi Prentice was part of that. She came to our diocese to do the planned giving workshop. but she's a professional coach, and she just talked about asking good questions, like asking who, what, where, and how questions, and activating curiosity and imagination versus solving things for people. And I just thought that that framework of asking questions and coming into situations with a lot of curiosity was a great takeaway. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Bill.
I went to a session that David Gortner was part of on Embracing Evangelism masterclass. And basically it was just kind of a preview of a program that a group at BTS has put together that is video based, and they showed us one of the videos of it, and it was basically the doing what we did at our gathering day last spring or fall with the cards and talking about what we had at our gathering day, talk about something that's either sad or happy, major event in your life. And they just went with sad. And they gave all the instructions for it and actually did it in the video. So you just watch other people do that whole exercise, or as they said, stop the video periodically and do what they're doing on the video in the room or in a gathering. So that's just one of the elements of this master class. They said that the whole thing will not be released till after Easter. I was thinking in terms of maybe we could use something of it for our spring gathering day, but they absolutely will not release any of the materials until after Easter. So anyway, we can look at it later. David is one of the producers of it, so he can share it with us too, I imagine. Also, I went to something about Invite, Welcome, Connect, but I went to an introductory session which presented what I know already about Invite, Welcome, Connect. And there was a deeper dive that I didn't go to because I spent much of Thursday trying to change my itinerary and travel plans to come back home early. And then Friday, I came back home early. So I missed some of the sessions on Thursday and everything on Friday. So I think still that I'd like to look into Invite, Welcome, Connect as a piece of what we do at Gathering Day, in the Spring Gathering Day. And I hope we have some time to talk about how Rooted Talks will inform our plans for Gathering Day. And then I will ask Jan to continue.
I'm glad you brought that up, Bill, because I talked with the woman who invented it, Mary, whatever, Palmer or whatever, and asked her about small churches. I said, if I gave this book to most of the churches I work with, they would toss it out in a heartbeat when they saw the kinds of programs that, all these different committees and now, hey, we added 100 people. They're trying to add 2. It was just at such a different scale. And she said that one of her people had done a lot of work with small churches, and she had recognized the gap, and they're going to redo all their videos, all their teaching stuff, all their website. But I meant to get a hold of her, and it slipped my mind. So I want to prod her about that, because the 9 people at St. Matthew's cannot and all those committees. But I believe in the work. I think and she was very confident that it would scale down, and that it has. They just haven't published anything about that. So that's one of my takeaways. I don't even know where to begin, in a sense. I mean, I got blown away by the first sessions on evangelism, talking about how it is, how do we start from great love? And I'm thinking we got to define love. That it's not church hospitality, and it's not church growing, and it's not inviting people to church, and it's not so many things that we've been associating, or people have been associating with doing evangelism. That it really is sharing good news regardless of the outcome. And one of the things I want to find, I'm not great at navigating all of these resources, but the Burning Man, did you see that, Bill? Were you in those Tuesday sessions?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That was Brian Baker.
Yeah. I think that thing on Burning Man was fantastic.
Jan, you have to go to Burning Man.
As long as I don't have to take my clothes off. I mean, that would scare people. You don't want to look at old bodies. It's too sad. I don't mind looking at them, but anyway, yeah, I think his knowledge, his revelations about going from handing out his business card with his church and things on it to saying, I'm just there to serve the people's needs and help them find their way spiritually, is a big learning in a very graphic and wow way of that evangelism really isn't church growth in that sense. And if we're doing it for church growth, that may be why it's not working, because we're inauthentic and we're not sharing the real good. The real good news is we really need you in our church. You know, we need your kids, we need your butts, we need your pledge. That's not what people are looking for. People want to belong, but that's not the way to go about it. So there was all that session on, you know, the what, why seek, and what are we seeking, and what, when, and all of this was very good. Let's see. On and on. And I mean, the whole thing was so rich. How do you choose what to share at this point? I don't know. It's just, it goes, it was again and again and again, I got it's not our job to save the church. It's our purpose is to help people develop their relationship with God through Christ, and the church to facilitate that as one possible way to facilitate that. But this is not just about, and what I said in the opening part, all the sessions that pointed toward evangelism has to rest on formation, and realizing that if the people aren't no wonder they say, I don't know what to say. Well, they don't know what to say. And that's why it's exciting to do the story work with them. I have flagged so many people. Form people so they have pie to share. That whole thing on pie, I'd have to go back to that. I often found that I was so captivated by the sessions, and there's a lot in my head, but my notes aren't necessarily all that helpful because I was paying too much attention to take really good notes. If you can imagine how that leaves you. But there was one piece at the end that I want to get back to Lisa about once I get my hands on a copy of Westerhoff's Will Our Children Have Faith, which I will get on Saturday, which is tomorrow. She talked about a continuum of faith is experienced, affiliative, when you want to start belonging. Then you start searching about what you really believe. It then becomes more of a core thing. And there's kind of an aha moment between when you've had some sort of experience and it's now you feel very much a part of everything, and isn't this great? And then you begin to have some doubts, and the honeymoon is over. And that searching phase, she said, is where awful lot, if not most clergy lie. And I wonder if this isn't also a key to our situation, that especially in the Episcopal Church, which does not recruit and require rigid belief, that our clergy are searching in a way that makes them less dedicated to trying to persuade other people to the faith. That I want to, if Westerhoff himself doesn't unpack that about clergy, because his book is basically about kids, I will get back to Lisa ASAP and say, Lisa Kimball, tell me more about this, because I think that's a piece of the motivational stuff and everything about this working through our congregations. If the clergy are kind of wandering in their faith, that's fine, but I just think we need to acknowledge it and say, how do we put this to the service of what we're trying to do, and not find that they're not on board with it because we're thinking of something else. The lack of cookie cutter thing, the lack of a program that, this is not a program. This is not something you can just say, this is how we're all going to do it. That it does take the individual story, the individual time, the willingness to share who you are and what your good news is. That is, that's going to be an interesting one to try to teach and have a program to bring about, have the support in place for the congregations to do, because we're very good at training people on how to do stuff. And from the get-go, they're saying that doesn't work. That's not what this is about. You can't. And then, yes, there are some tools and there's some things we can do. So I've got to take pages and pages and pages of this notebook and try to, not so much, I didn't even always write down what workshop I was in. Just, where are we now? And weave it together. It pretty much does, but I just need to spend some more time. So that's, and get back to Hebrews and provoking people to love. And there was something the presiding bishop said that was interesting about how the Episcopal Church, the beginning of the change in the Episcopal Church is when we fell in love with good works. We really liked how it felt to do good in the community. What are the things that are working, and how do we help people extract from that their story as a faith motivation, not a Rotary motivation for doing. I mean, the Rotary people love to do good works too, and my Rotary Club sounds like a church anyway. It's a little irritating sometimes, but how do we help people find what's motivating them and extract their faith story within that, if that's where the Spirit is moving for them? And it's pretty individual. So it's going to be fun doing it. Giving them the tools for all those, for everybody to have something unique. And I think we did this with what was it? What was that program years and years ago? We did only once and everybody loved it, and then we never did it again.
Was it EFM?
No.
Yeah, whatever. Did anybody ever find the instructions and notes from that? Didn't Devin come and do that with us?
Right, Devin Anderson that's what her name's connected with. Yes, and that was it was Industrial Area Foundation, IAF. That was the methodology for that.
Because if we can find that stuff, we've done it once in quite a number of years ago. I mean, within my retirement time, but so it's sometime in the last decade. But so we have some stuff about sharing your personal narrative, I think it was called. And it was pretty powerful stuff, as I recall.
Organizing for Mission.
That was it.
Right. Yeah.
Neil has it right on hand.
OFM, not EFM.
OFM, right. Yeah, we had a certificate.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, just like Oz, you have a certificate. It's not real till you have a certificate or a medal.
Yeah, we were going to do a second round of that, and then and Devin came back and talked about it, and then that went pooped out.
Yeah, but I wonder if you've got the materials that about developing the personal narrative.
No, I arrived on the scene here just when St. Stephen's was participating in that, but not with any of the lead up and training that went into that.
Jane might. I mean, it was going as soon as she arrived, bam. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't done real well there because.
But Jen, there is an OFM binder here, which okay. I have never taken off the shelf. So I think it does have all that training material in it.
Oh.
So we may already have something really good that's been tested in the diet. Some people will remember.
Imagine it should be in the Paulson House too, somewhere.
I will ask around and see, and maybe, you know, Christy might know, or, you know,
Yeah.
some people who were around
OFO,
years ago.
yeah.
Yeah, the methodology was good too, and it is the Industrial Area Foundation method of doing your personal narrative, right?
Wow.
That's great. I'll see if I can track down some stuff on that. Thank you for that. We have just a couple more minutes more. Does anybody have anything that kind of cropped up that they wanted to share? Or any questions? Oh, go ahead.
I just also one of that came out of the soft space. This quote that kind of struck me is saying that fishing for people is the work, not the program. And I thought that was really insightful. That we fish if we to eat first, that comes, and so instead of being so caught on the program, remembering our work is to fish for people.
I remember them pleading, and I think the last workshop I was at, please don't invite people to a dead church. If they have a bad experience there, then they not only aren't going to go to your church, they're going to have a bad feeling about the Episcopal Church in general. And they will probably tell other people, because we tend to share more negative news than we share positive news. So they're saying, you know, don't do that.
I have some pithy quotes that I can give in a less than a minute. One is, to create change in the congregation, I need to change myself first. Another is quote from Rowan Williams: the purpose of the church is to form people into the kinds of people who can receive the gifts that God wants to give. Another is, evangelism without formation is just us talking. And move with the people who are willing to move and ready and willing to move, and just pastor the rest.
And something that I think was Jesus Reyes said, folks come to church with something to let go or to grow in some way. They actually want change, or they wouldn't have come. So it's like, what do they, you know, again, a lot of listening.
Thank you all for your time, and thank you for going to Rooted in Jesus. That was really fun to experience that with all of you.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a lovely day.
You too.
All right.
You
See you all
too.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.